Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. That is Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11, and is a good place to start, despite the fact that we're in the middle of our leadership series today, because today we're going to discuss what it looks like for a leader, or really just any person in general, but particularly a person in leadership who has people looking to them, following them, to care for themselves. So we're going to kind of circle back to this Exodus scripture later. But Brian, this is really important to you.
Yeah.
Something you'll get into, I know, is how this really fits into being a pastor. Somebody not only just leading an organization like the church, but who is trying to lead, or as we might say in the church, shepherd people.
Yeah.
Self-care is really, really critical.
It is.
So we're going to discuss a little bit of that today. I kind of want you to start, though, about really where you see this in your life specifically, not necessarily just related to the church, but again, we're in a leadership situation. So how do you see it just in your leadership? Like, when did you discover that self-care was something that you were really going to need? Was it almost you was too late, or did you know it early on like you have some other stuff?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that my story of discovery for self-care really became tangible when I ran into a wall. I ran my life into a wall. So when I was in seminary, they teach you about self-care, and it's academic. So I had a piece of paper. I took good notes. I got an A on the test. I'm sure I did. Wasn't that complicated. It wasn't physics. But at the end of the day, there are two kinds of pastors. This is going to sound incredibly insulting to some people, and I don't mean it to be. I'm just going to state a fact. We just tell the truth. There are pastors who are built to they're sort of like chaplains. So they care for people, they preach sermons, they marry and bury, and they're not wired to or trained to or both charge the hill.
Okay.
Lead the church, take it somewhere, conquer. They're not wired, and that's not bad.
Right.
That sounds judgmental, or as if I think one's lesser. I don't. Then there's another kind, and the people that do what I do are church planter types. They might not have planted a church, but they took a church that was small and grew it and charged the hill and conquered and won people, and they see the goal line just ever moving.
Right.
They're never satisfied with where they are, which in some ways can be a holy discontent, and in some ways can be an unhealthy level of ambition. Anyway.
Right. Like it's never good enough kind of thing.
Like it's never good enough. And there's a fine line between the two, and a little bit hard to diagnose the difference. But people like me who are entrepreneurial and always want to be moving, and we believe that God is doing something amazing, but he's not finished yet. We feel a sense of urgency. And so all that is to say, all that academic stuff I learned about self-care, yeah, sure, it's great, it sounds great, but I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Until you reach a place where you're so broken from working 100 hours a week and not paying attention to important things that you should have been paying attention to all along, that you have no choice then, like things start shutting down.
Right.
And that's when I think I realized, if you don't pay attention to this long term, this is how people drive their lives and their ministry off a cliff. And this can be inside of pastoral leadership or in other kinds of leadership. And that's how people get in real trouble. Not paying attention to this, to self-care, is very dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a self-imposed pressure from a leader.
Absolutely.
I know particularly in the church world, but I think leadership anywhere.
Yes.
And it's good in theory and it's well-meaning, but these people are relying on me.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
That's absolutely
so
right.
Like to self-care, quote unquote, whether that's taking a break or going somewhere to clear your head, which some of the stuff we'll get into, maybe it can be seen as I'm letting them down.
Yeah.
Like I'm not giving all of myself.
Yeah.
When really, as you pointed to, if you operate with that mentality, eventually it will catch up with you.
That's right. Yeah. It's the standard, this has become such a cliche now, I almost hate to say it, but it's the standard talk where you put on your oxygen mask before you help someone else put on their oxygen mask.
Right.
Stephen Covey uses this illustration about sharpening the saw and says the guy who, is out there with a chainsaw cutting down trees and never pauses to sharpen the saw gets less done, even though he's working more, gets less done than the guy who stops at regular intervals to sharpen his saw, because the sharp saw is what actually does the work.
Right.
So when we don't slow down, in other words, to take care of ourselves, we actually hurt the thing we think that we're accomplishing while we're working ourselves to death.
Right.
And so every leader of any kind of organization has got to pay attention to this. And they do feel an incredible burden. Leaders feel the burden of the organization, of moving the organization, of sustaining the employees in the organization. Leaders feel the burden of the whole thing at any kind of organization. It can be church, but it can be any kind of organization that you lead. Leaders feel this burden. And so therefore to slow down feels like I'm letting down the rest of the team. You also feel this burden of, people are watching me, and if I take a break, everybody take a break, and then we won't get anything done. And there's a bunch of silliness that you do in your head when it comes to self-care. But it's very important. Leaders have got to figure this out, and I'm hoping we can offer some helpful.
Yeah, and I think a good way to get into that would be, you mentioned a second ago at the beginning, really, that you learn this by basically approaching that precipice or the edge of that cliff.
Yeah.
Were you thinking of a specific instance in your life or just a season of your life?
Yeah.
So tell us about that, and then what were those first initial steps of, I have to do something?
Yeah.
And how did you get there?
Well, we just built our first building as a church, and it was a mess. It was a whole rip-roaring mess. We started building we built just before the world collapsed in the 2008-9 recession. We were right in the middle of that. We had major trouble with our builder, and ended up in a lawsuit over it. It was just a mess. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we were approaching 10 years as a church, and we had grown from quite literally a handful of people in my living room to a church that was at that point, I don't know, it was 1,000 or 1,500 people. I mean, it's big. We were a big church for our area anyway. And it had grown so fast that you were just working to keep up with it. So all that is to say, at that point, I'm working 100 hours a week. I'm super stressed because we have these building problems that the amount of money we were talking about was not a small amount of money.
Right.
And so I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, and my solution for it was just work harder.
Yeah, right.
Just work harder. Meanwhile, my family's, I'm not seeing my family at all, and all that. So the things that would give me life, I was neglecting, and the things that were taking life were the things I was just giving more time to, and I had no control over some of them. So I was putting energy and effort into things that I could not affect change. So it was just a recipe for disaster. Anyway, I essentially had a meltdown, and Aunt Susan was very helpful. I ended up in a counselor's office trying to sort out, and part of it was just incredible mental, emotional fatigue that came out of not giving myself appropriate self-care, not setting a pace that was sustainable, working hours consistently. Look, every leader, there's no leader of anything of significance that doesn't occasionally work 100 hours a week or a 100-hour week. I'm not saying you never do it, but when you do it over and over and over again consistently, you're going to break something. When I went to see the doctor, finally, I saw a counselor and a doctor, and the doctor said, when you work as hard as you've worked for as long as you've worked it, you're going to break something. Yeah. And what he said to me was, if you don't do something, you're going to break it permanently. So that's when I got serious. Like, man, I gotta make a change here. And I did make some pretty significant changes in my lifestyle, in the way that I lead, in the way that I work, that still make me, I still work hard. I still work a lot. but I'm able to find more balance and have more, I think, paying attention to the things I can control.
Yeah.
I focus a lot more on that.
Right. I suspect that you mentioned just you felt like the weight of the world was on you, particularly because you mentioned money and the amounts you were talking about with the building and everything were huge. But the extra element to that I think if you're not in the church world, if you're not in ministry, that you can't totally appreciate is that like people gave that money.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I felt a huge, huge responsibility. These people trusted us. They gave here. And they expected certain things to happen that we told them were going to happen.
Right.
And so I did. I felt a huge responsibility, a stewardship responsibility to them, and frankly, a huge stewardship responsibility to our staff, many of whom made significant lifestyle choices, left other jobs that were paying significantly more, believed in our cause, made a huge sacrifice to come work here, and in all of that season, it was just the perfect storm. I'm looking at everybody and I'm thinking, I don't know how we're going to make payroll.
Right.
And when, and it wasn't just like this went on for months. Every week we were trying to figure out how. I was just trying to, no one at that time, I didn't have, Elijah, you're part of our SLT, our strategic leadership team, which is functions like our senior staff. I didn't really have that functioning. So I really felt alone. I felt like it was all on me.
Yeah.
And that is just not healthy. It's just not healthy.
Yeah. But up to that point, to be fair to you, with the exception of Susan.
Yeah.
It kind of was.
Well, it was.
And so like it was, but I think the organization and the reach and the impact had outsized your ability to be that way.
It did. But if I could be so bold, that reality faces every leader at some point. Now, they might have different points, but at some point, every leader reaches a place in their organization where the burden of carrying the organization outsizes them as an individual.
Right.
And that's why it's so critical. And I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Maybe we're getting into the meat of it, but it's so critical that a leader builds around himself or herself a team that can carry the load with them.
Yeah. And
it took a long time for me to get the SLT right, if you will. But I honestly believe today that group of people, there's 7 of us, including you, I don't feel like I carry burdens alone anymore. I think that, and every leader is going to face challenges, and every organization is going to face challenges. So it's a fantasy to say we're going to create an environment where we eliminate challenges. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
What you have to do then is figure out how can I build systems that make the challenges not just sustainable, but more easily and effectively overcome.
Yeah.
And a key component of that is the senior team, the leadership, the pinnacle leadership team in the organization. For us, that's the SLT. And I feel like when we have a burden now, I don't carry it by myself.
Right. And that, in my mind, plays into a little bit of recently we had a conversation at our leadership development, which we do as a staff here at PCC once a month. You mentioned Stephen Covey already. He talks about in that same book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the quadrants. And your team, to use his language, can help mitigate as much as possible leaving quadrant 2 and go to quadrant 1, which is like a crisis emergency. Some of those things are just going to happen in life, as you mentioned, that you can't control. You talked about sort of the economic implosion of that time.
Yeah.
You couldn't help that, obviously.
Nope.
However, because those other things had built up as well, it made that all the worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think part of self-care, because there are probably people listening to this right now who think, I feel good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm good.
Yeah.
And so of course the pressing need doesn't seem urgent right now.
Right.
But self-care only works really if you have that rhythm built in before the crisis arrives.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it, because before we reach the economic recession, what they call the Great Recession of 2008 and 9, along with the perfect storm of us having major building issues and funding issues around the building.
Right.
Prior to that, say, let's call it 2006, 2007, everything was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Every line of every graph in our church was up and to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean a little bit. It wasn't like a gradual line. Like we were rocketing.
Yeah.
In every measurable capacity. It was amazing. But underneath of it, what we had not done was anticipate a bad day.
Yeah. Right.
So Jim Collins says, if you want to be a great organization, you have to carry extra oxygen tanks. And he uses this illustration about going up Mount Everest. And he says, people that survive Mount Everest don't just carry the oxygen that they're going to need. They carry extra oxygen because they might need it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we started talking about, well, what does it mean for us to prepare for an anticipated struggle, even if we don't know what the struggle is? That included things like building in an emergency reserve and being careful to be slightly lean instead of slightly not lean. In other words, I'd rather be just slightly understaffed because then you don't have an extra burden of unnecessary payroll cost.
Right.
And there were other things too. So I feel like you're right. I think leaders have to be prepared. They can prepare for unanticipated seasons. This is the whole concept that Jim Collins talks about when he says carry extra oxygen tanks, is you have to anticipate. He has this phrase, he says you have to develop what he calls productive paranoia, which is something challenging or bad is around the corner. You don't have to be unproductive about it, but there's a way to be productive about it.
Yeah.
We did not. I did not. So there was no margin built into the church. There was no margin built into my life.
Yeah.
And when the crisis came, there was just no reserve in any capacity for us to handle it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say something and then kind of ask you a question that I'm curious your answer to about it. Because when I think about you, I think I know you personally, and I think like we all are, we can be more critical on ourselves in the way we were than others were. I think about you in that time, which I was starting to come to PCC sort of right before what you're referring to happened, and I was actually in high school at the time. But what would have even compelled you to say we needed something like that? Yeah. I mean, literally all evidence, like you said, was pointing up and to the right. Yeah. So to me, and this is kind of the question, even though I'm not totally confident I'm going to phrase it like a question.
All right.
Hopefully you can just unearth
I got it. Sure.
Is it completely possible for a person to do what you're talking about, prepare well, put the self-care, work-life balance thing in their lives before the crisis if they've never truly approached the crisis line? You know what I mean? Because, can they really appreciate it like you do now, how important it is?
I don't think they can fully appreciate it. You said, can they appreciate it like I do now?
Yeah.
No. The answer is no.
Yeah.
But can they prepare? Smart people would heed the advice of those who've gone before them.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did not.
Yeah.
So
you'd heard it.
Oh, I had even literally considered the question. So we followed for a long time. We followed Willow Creek Church. Mm-hmm. And Willow Creek has since had other kinds of major trouble. But before its recent history, Willow Creek had a long-time consistent leader. Bill Hybels had pastored the church for a long time, and we respected him and revered him and all the things. Well, they kept talking about this story. There was this story in their early days, and they called it the train wreck. And they would tell the story over and over and over again. Now we're brand new. We're 2, 3, 4 years into it. And then there's another church nearby where we are in physical proximity geographically that I know really well. And they're a few years older than us. And early in the life of their church, they had a train wreck. They called it the train wreck. Mm. And so with those two stories, I literally went around to people and I would say, do we have to have a train wreck? Okay. I would ask that question. I would say, do we have to have a train wreck? Is it possible we go without a train wreck? And people who are smart would say, hey, man, this is life, bro. You don't get through life without having a train wreck.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to expect that it's coming. And I would shrug my shoulders and say, well, gosh, it sure does sound reasonable in theory.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, when the church is moving that fast and everything's going that well, it's not like you're looking at your budget and going, well, we got this extra, pick a number, 50 grand laying around. Maybe we ought to put it in a rainy day fund, because you're growing so fast you can't keep up. So you're like, we can't put this money to the side. We need it.
Yeah,
we have to have it.
Yeah.
We're growing so fast we couldn't hire people fast enough. I couldn't find staff fast enough. There was just it just didn't seem reasonable to kick some money in some savings account when we so desperately needed it to grow. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, we would have done whatever it took.
Yeah.
I would have said, we're going to have some money in reserves in order to make sure. And I would have done that in my personal life too.
Sure.
Not, I don't mean financially. I mean like with the margin you need, because when we got to the place of crisis, I was so spent that I didn't have the emotional reserves to push through it, which is why I ended up, in my own personal crisis in a counselor's office.
Right. When the people of the church and you yourself needed you probably the most in history.
That's right.
You were basically out of gas.
I was out of gas. And I did some level of my job, but I could have been so much better for my family and for the church if I had known that the train wreck was coming, not in theory.
Yeah.
Today we're in a whole different place. I've got mechanisms in my life, and we've got mechanisms in the church to be able to anticipate that a storm is coming. There's always a storm coming.
Yeah.
Now, there are limits. I think when it comes to the church, there's a responsibility to people don't give here so that we can hoard it.
Yeah, right.
But people also expect the church to be financially responsible, and so we make sure that there's a reserve that is reasonable.
Right.
We can get through most any crisis. If we go through another Great Depression in America, I don't just throw everything off the table.
All bets are off.
All bets are off.
That's true for everybody.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's get into the weeds of how this actually looks then.
Yep.
With the time we have left. So you went through that, and I'm sure there are more examples you could give. But what does it look like now?
Yep.
You said, knowing what I know now, I do this.
Yep. How
does this happen? Not just in the church life, but in your personal life as well. Because I mentioned kind of in jest earlier that there might be people here being like, oh, I'm good. Maybe like where you were before.
Sure.
I suspect there are more people here who maybe might even be in the middle of that.
Yep.
In their leadership, in their personal life, whatever it might be. So what does it actually look like to take some self-care for yourself? Yeah.
So if I could put some spiritual terms on this, because I think for somebody who's a follower of Jesus, and I'm hoping at times that maybe listeners will join us that are still exploring faith, and that's okay. For those of us who are followers of Jesus, we're paying attention to what the Bible says, particularly to Jesus' words. And one time Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice." Mm-hmm. Well, the only reason the sheep know his voice is because the sheep are in proximity to the shepherd and they're paying attention.
Yeah.
So he's speaking, they've got to be around to listen. So here's what often happens is people, and I'm just being honest now, people don't spend a lot of time paying attention to their spiritual life when everything is great. Then the crisis comes, they get on their knees, they're crying out to God, and then they say, I just don't know why God is not responding to me.
Right.
Well, it's not because God's not responding. It's because you haven't cultivated the ears to hear his voice.
You don't recognize the voice.
The sheep know the shepherd, but you haven't been part of it. You have not invested into your spiritual life. Therefore, you don't recognize the voice of God. That's not saying anything about your eternal destination. It's just stating a fact.
Right.
So the cultivation of your spiritual life is super important, especially when things are great. Because here's the thing about life. Waves crash. You don't stay on the top of the mountain. If you're in a valley, the good news is you keep moving, you'll rise to higher ground. If you're on top of the mountain, the bad news is You just don't stay there forever.
In this world, you will have trouble.
In this world, you will have trouble. So we have to recognize that life is cyclical. We're going to go through bad days. We're going to go through good days. When times are great, that is the best time because you've got the margin and the capacity to say, let me reorder my life to make sure that I'm cultivating good spiritual practices, which include connecting with God. We do that when we pray. We do that when we meditate on Scripture, read the Bible. These are important things. You brought up earlier the practice of Sabbath, which is something I did not really do until I hit my wall. Mm-hmm. And then I realized this is not just a good practice. This is something God built into the rhythm of human beings.
Yes.
Every day, we all require a shutdown. We go to sleep.
Yep.
Different ones of us maybe require different amounts of sleep, and I'm certainly not a sleep expert, and so I should probably stay out of that lane, but we all need some kind of sleep.
Right.
Every day there's a rhythm to the shutting down. God built into us a rhythm into the week. And if we think about the illustration of sharpening the saw, if you work, the people who observe this carefully, not legalistically,
right,
but carefully, find that they can get more done in 6 days than the person who's killing themselves working 7.
Right.
And frankly, can get more done in 8 or 9 or 10 days, 8 or 9 or 10 hours in a day than the person who's working 14.
Right.
In fact, there have been significant psychological studies that have proven this. You don't need to be a spiritual person or to invest in, a life following Jesus to pay attention to the data. The data is pretty overwhelming about this, that people who concentrate their time but also concentrate their rest and invest in things that they enjoy are more productive with the lesser time that they work.
Right, and I think that's key, something you just mentioned there that I was going to bring up too. The Sabbath, particularly in Scripture, but just this idea, it's not just about doing nothing.
Oh, no.
Or sleeping. You know what I mean? I think, I know people don't probably necessarily interpret it as just sleeping, but it's not just sitting on a couch or doing anything like that. It's being able to focus. You said earlier, part of your lament from the past was you were focusing on, I wrote it down, the things that gave me life I was neglecting, but the things that took my life I was focusing on.
That's right.
When you actually practice Sabbath, that is your window to reverse that.
You invert that. That's right.
Right. And then in that way, you are rejuvenated for the things that do need your time, but you're not empty.
Yeah, and I think leaders particularly struggle with Sabbath practice.
Yeah.
Because we do so much. There's so much. There's never a moment where the entire to-do list is complete. And so it's just natural. And plus, if we're being honest about this, many leaders love what we do.
Oh yeah.
So it feels unnatural to step away from it, but we have to do that. And part of it is the spiritual practice. When we practice Sabbath, what happens is we recognize that the world does not spin because of me. When I step away from it, I give God the credit and say, I removed myself from the work that I see that is important, that I'm a part of, but the day after the Sabbath, the world moved on. Yeah. I recognize the world was still going.
Okay, yeah.
And it's an important, healthy, because otherwise we dupe ourselves into believing that we're the ones making everything happen, but we're not.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not. And so I think taking the Sabbath time is a time of reflection. And it is a time of rest, but I don't necessarily think it's a time of sleep. It's not like you sleep all day long.
Sure, yeah.
I'm resting, I'm recouping, I'm spending time doing some things that I love, spend time with my family. For a long time, we took our Sabbath day and we got to spend it with our grandkids. It was just life-giving. I think people, when I talk about the legalistic practice of it, people take this thing too far. In terms of, rules. This was very Pharisaical in the Bible. There are all these rules built around the Sabbath. So, for example, I love working in my yard. It's very relaxing for me. Technically speaking, mowing the grass or pulling the weeds is probably, it's probably not permitted on the Sabbath if you're legalistic about this.
Right.
But it's life-giving for me. I love doing that. So I think people have to find what is the thing that breathes life to them, but also the thing that helps them reflect on who God is and what God's done and where I am in the big picture of it all. And I think those are all just key pieces of Sabbath practice that people just many people don't do. But it's an important part of your spiritual, it's an important part of your self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter what field you're in, if you're a follower of Christ, it's something, as we read at the beginning, has been embedded in you since the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, if God Himself did it,
Right.
right, then and sort of mandated it or ordained it for us, then it's critical to us, not just as something that would be helpful,
Mhm.
but actually integral to us functioning at our highest level.
That's right.
So, with the time we have left, how did what's the frequency that you're doing this kind of thing? I'm sure it varies season to season.
Yeah.
In our staff here, we quote unquote in theory have built in
Yeah.
a Sabbath day.
Yep.
We have Fridays off for this kind of thing. But you personally, aside from that, what does self-care look like for
Yeah.
you today?
Yeah. So there are a few things that are rhythmic for me.
Yeah.
And this falls in terms of both self-care, but also spiritual practice. So for me, I spend some time reading the Bible every morning.
Mhm.
For me, the morning is critical. I want to order my day built on a foundation of connection with God. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes. It's not, and look, people look at the church, people who are pastors and think we just sit around and chant and pray all day long. I spend about 20 minutes
Yeah.
reading the Bible. I spend some time in prayer, sometimes a little bit longer, but not an hour and a half. And look, if people can do that, I think that's great.
Oh yeah.
But for me, that orders my day. It centers me on the presence of God and the reality of who God is from the very beginning. So I do that first thing in the morning, and then I want to make sure that I finish my day with almost every day. I can pull this off now, where I get home in time to sort of let the air out of the balloon a little bit. I just need some time to decompress before I used to come home. I mean, for years, for probably 7 or 8 or 9 years, I would just come home and collapse. Go home at 10 o'clock. I started my day at 6:30. I would just collapse.
Yeah.
So I want enough time to just have some margin for decompression at the end of my day. I want to connect with Susan. That's life-giving for me. It's important. So that's kind of a daily routine. And it also begins with a workout. So for me, part of self-care is exercise.
Right.
So I spend a little bit of time with God. I go to the gym 5 days out of 7 every week. And then I go to work. And then I want to make sure that I'm home in time to have some decompression. That's my daily routine.
Yeah.
And then when we Sabbath, we really try hard to shut down in terms of connection with the outside world. And yet we can't draw hard boundaries around this.
Right.
I kind of envy people who can, but here's what I say. I don't mean this to be ugly. This will sound a little bit crass, but this is how I put it. I say people don't pick a convenient time to die.
Yeah.
They just die. And when they do, the pastor has to show up.
Yeah, no matter what.
And it's my calling. It's not just my job. So when they're in my purview, when they're people that are on my radar, if I'm not out of town or something, I got to go. Funerals often happen on a Saturday. Weddings happen on Saturdays, which means rehearsals happen on Friday nights. So Fridays sometimes get, they just get commandeered. And I can't say, sorry, it's my Sabbath. I'm not going to come to the hospital and pray over your loved one who's about to die. I'm not going to do that. And yet, to the extent possible, I do protect that. We don't do meetings. I try to avoid other kinds of communiques. Although sometimes, if I'm just thinking about something, I might send an email or something because it's just easier to do it then than to try to remember it all day long. Oh, don't forget to tell Elijah. Don't forget to tell Elijah. Might as well just tell him.
Right.
It's just quicker that way. But I try to stay away from that stuff. And then, nature abhors a vacuum. So instead of just doing nothing, I'm going to invest in things that I love. I'm going to do some fun things.
Yeah.
And some things that really are life-giving for me. And then for me, I got to a place in my leadership where I needed a little bit of an extended break that was not vacation to focus on some bigger picture things. So I do a study break every summer, usually for 3, 4, 5 weeks, where I have some specific books that I read, but I do a good bit of planning, and I step away from the heavy meeting-centric type of work that we normally do.
Yeah.
So that I can then focus on some bigger picture stuff. That's part of the rhythm of my life. And then finally, I think in all the years, we've been a church for 24 years, I think only one time did I not take all the vacation I'm entitled to. I just really feel strongly about that. I think everybody works hard. If you get 3 weeks of vacation, you should take all 3 weeks. And I know lots of people out in the world, not just in the church world, that just say, I've never taken all my vacation. And I'm thinking, man, you're crazy. You should take every piece of vacation. You earned that.
Yeah.
And your family earned it with you, and they deserve that time with you. So when I'm on study break, I say to our team, hey guys, I'm on study break. It's not that I'm not working. I'm just working in a different way. But when I go on vacation, I say to our team, man, unless the building's burning down, please leave me alone.
Don't call me. Yeah. Because you need it. As we were talking about. You have to have it. So when you come back,
right,
you're the best Brian.
That's right.
That you can be.
That's right.
I'm the best Elijah I can be. And you, if you're listening, wherever you are, at the end of your rope, or you feel really good right now, is something that you have to have.
Yeah.
You need to know it now. And if you really are in a good place right now, as Brian said, this really is the best time to actually make it a priority in your life, practice that Sabbath rest, connect with God, connect with the people that you love, or as Brian said it, the things that give you life. Focus on that in that time, because it will serve you immensely. In fact, it'll really be the only way you can make it through the hard season that is coming.
That's right.
For sure. So thank you, as always, for listening, everybody. Thank you for being a part of this series on leadership. We have a few more to go in this series, so hope you've been enjoying it. Both Brian and I have loved hearing from y'all about the impact that this podcast is making in your lives. I heard from one of you recently about you just have somebody adjacent to you, is not a part of this church or anything, that was going through something in their marriage, and you were able to send an episode to them. So that's the kind of stuff we love. That's what we want you to be able to do with this podcast. So use it, share it, follow, subscribe, all the things, do all of it. And we are just really glad to be able to share some of this with y'all. Brian, thank you.
Yeah, it's been
for
great.
This. It's really, really helpful stuff. Hopefully you can apply it. And until then, we'll see you next time.